So welcome everyone and welcome to those in attendance at the remote meeting of the local review body of Aberdeen City Council. Please note that the meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after the meeting. You're also reminded to note that we may have members of public and press observing today's proceedings. Can I make a point? Can I ask those who are observing today's meeting to keep their microphones and cameras switched off throughout? Please note that applicants, agents or interested parties are not allowed to take part in any of the LRB's proceedings, and mics and cameras should remain off throughout the meeting. We do have a camera on from Mr. McWilliam. If he can kindly turn that camera off, thank you very much. Can members of the local review body leave their cameras on but mute their microphones when not speaking? As this local review body contains quasi-judicial business, members are reminded that it should not leave the meeting during consideration of any of these reviews. This meeting has been convened in response to two requests. The first case is a review of the decision taken by the appointed officer under the Council scheme of delegation, and the second application is for a decision on the non-determination of the application. Members of the local review body have before them copies of the review documents as listed in the notice calling the meeting. We'll now ask Mrs. McBain, Assistant Clerk, to outline the procedures to be followed in the conduct of these reviews and to take a roll call of all members present.
Thank you, Chair. Members have the procedure note which was circulated with the meeting papers and is intended to set out the wider framework within which the review process operates. The first task for the review body is to come to a decision on whether the review documents contain sufficient information for the case to be determined without further procedure, and by that it is meant without further information or representations. The regulations governing the local review process require that all matters which the applicant intends to raise in the review must be set out in or accompany the notice of review. The focus of the review should be on the basis of what was before the appointed officer when a decision was made, and only in exceptional circumstances will new or additional matters be permitted to be taken into account. The circumstances in which additional matters can be taken into account are set out in the legislation and will be addressed by the LRB's advisors where relevant. This review should take the form of a structured discussion led by the chairperson to consider the matter set out in the notice of review before you, and I would conclude by drawing your attention in particular to points 10 to 12 of the procedure note. I'll just quickly do a roll call, so just please indicate your presence. Chairperson?
Present.
Councillor Cook?
Yep, present.
And Councillor Clark? Present. Okay, thank you, Kendra.
Thank you very much. So turning to consideration of the first review in respect of a decision to refuse the application for detailed plan permission for the change of use of flat to short-term let accommodation. This is with a maximum occupancy of 2 people at 21B Springbank Street, Aberdeen. Planning reference is 260453. We'll now hear from the planning advisor in attendance, Ms. Lucy Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal and a reminder of the reasons why the application was refused. I would like to highlight today that Ms. Green attends today's meeting to provide us with the necessary professional planning guidance because she has not been involved in the early consideration of the application under review. Ms. Green will not, however, be asked to express any view on the merits of the proposed development, and in effect, her role will be a neutral one involving the provision of factual information and guidance only. Ms. Green, over to you.
Thank you, convener, and morning members. I'll just share my presentation. Okay, hopefully you can see that. This is a review into a change of use to a short-term let at 21 Springbank Street. And the review was submitted within the timescales. The applicant indicated on the notice of review that there are new matters raised in the submissions. For reasons that I'll go into in a moment, they're not considered to be new matters in terms of the regulations. In terms of the procedure by which the review will be conducted, the applicant expressed the view that that it could continue on the basis of the information submitted. So I'll just provide some background information to the case before handing back to members to decide how to proceed and whether they have sufficient information. So this site is located on Springbank Street, just here. It's within a basement flat, and the red line just indicates the extent of that flat. So the entrance is to the rear, just here. And in order to access that, you have to go down this lane and under an arched access point and then across to the door, which is here. And the property contains 4 flats in total, so with this flat being in the basement level, there's another flat at ground floor level. And it also lies within the Bonaccord, Crescent and Crown Street conservation area. So this is the layout of the flat. Staircase is accessed from the rear, and then you go down into this hallway. There's 1 bedroom and the kitchen and lounge and bathroom. And these 3D images just illustrate that. So the front door's up here. And this is just taken from Google Street View. So this is Springbank Street here. It's accessed along this lane and then through here. And this is the doorway to the flat, doorway to another flat there. I've got some more site photographs in a minute. So the floor area is 75 square meters. No, sorry, that's wrong. I'm just reading that from somewhere else. And this is the street elevation. So this is the ground floor flats accessed through this front door. The basement flat is accessed through this route to the rear. And these are photographs from the case officer's site visit. So it's just showing the route down the side lane. Past this door and window, which belong to the ground floor flat, and then in through this gateway, which is leads through to the back of the property. And these are taken from the applicant's statement, so it's showing the same gateway within the lane. And then this area is leads to the front door of the property. And these are the gardens at the rear, which are shared. And then this again is taken from the applicant's statement, just showing the route through to the door. And from the case officer's site visit, so it's just showing the passageway from the other side. So it comes through here. This is the doorway to another flat. And there's also this doorway here to another flat, which is this door. Then leading to the front door of the application property. So the reasons for the decision that the change of use of the basement flat would have a significant adverse impact on the amenity of the neighbouring residents within the building through diminishing the privacy, sense of security and enjoyment of their properties, including the garden and access routes to the rear, which are mutually shared by other residents. This is because of the necessity to access the property via a narrow dark passage to the west of the building with no lighting or natural surveillance, and to cross a communal courtyard, which would result in strangers and frequently changing guests within areas of the property which would normally otherwise be semi-private and shared by the residents of the other flats in the building. And given the close proximity of properties to the rear of the building, screening of any kind to overcome loss of privacy wouldn't be feasible due to the adverse impact this would have on the amenity of the neighbouring properties. And as such, the proposal doesn't meet the criteria for non-householder development in residential areas in policy H1 residential areas of the local development plan, and is therefore not acceptable in principle. Likewise, the proposal fails to provide adequate amenity and therefore fails to comply with policies 14 on design in NPF 4, D1 on quality placemaking in the local plan, and H1 residential areas in the local plan, and also the short-term let Aberdeen planning guidance. So there was no objection from roads or the waste team. The community council had no comments, and there were 2 objections which referred to over provision of tourist accommodation, loss of residential housing, impact on residential amenity of guests within the garden and courtyard passing close to bedroom windows, concerns about late night behaviour and use of the access and garden by strangers and servicing staff, which would affect residents' feeling of safety, and also that the communal bins are abused by residents in the surrounding streets and the short-term let should manage its own waste. For the applicant's case, the first point that's made relates to what they referred to as new information, which was the movement activated lights that have been installed along the passage and at the entrance to the property to address concerns about darkness and lack of surveillance. So they were under discussion during the application, or the issue of darkness was under discussion. So the applicants now installed those lights, and they're shown in photographs in the submission. They also state that a door camera would be installed to prove occupancy and deter antisocial behaviour, that guests would be unlikely to use the garden as they would typically be out in the daytime, that to ensure good reviews, the applicant would maintain the garden area to the benefit of all the residents. They request that the application be approved with a guest management plan. They cite examples of approvals by the LRB of short-term lets at Park Place, Ash Hill Drive and Bonaccord Street. They state that the 2-person occupancy is comparable to a residential use, and that noise and disturbance would be unlikely to be different to those from a residential use. They state that the property is close to Union Street and public transport in the city centre, and that there are no objections from consultees. So at this point, I'll hand back to members to decide whether they have sufficient information and how they wish to proceed.
Thank you very much. We now need to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us today to take a decision on the application. Members, if you do not feel you have enough information to take a decision at this point, you can request for further written information to be provided, hearings to be arranged, or a site visit to be undertaken. I'll quickly go around the room. Councillor Clark. You're on mute, Councillor Clark.
Sorry, I feel I've got enough information to go with.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cook.
Yeah, me too. I think we've got enough info.
Thank you very much. I also agree that we've got enough information to proceed. So therefore, we'll now pass back to Ms Green, who will take us through the relevant policies and considerations for this review.
Thank you. So I'll move on to the policies that are relevant. These are the policies referred to in NPF 4, with policy 14 having been referred to in the reason for refusal. First of all, policies 1 and 2, obviously relevant to all applications. Obviously, this is a change of use application only, and so members may wish to consider the likely magnitude of any impact. But all decisions should give significant weight to the climate and nature crises and mitigation. Policy 7 is relevant in terms of the conservation area in which this building sits, and proposals in conservation areas will only be supported where there is no detrimental impact on the conservation area or where the character is preserved. And this policy relates to suitable management of refuse. Policy 13 on sustainable transport supports development proposals where they are accessible through public transport and active travel. And then policy 14 on design quality and place has the 6 qualities of successful places, and those include, in particular, healthy, prioritising women's safety and physical and mental health, pleasant environments, and also adaptability of buildings. So tourism policy 30, this refers to short-term holiday lets and states that proposals for the reuse of existing buildings for short-term lets will not be supported where there's an unacceptable impact on local amenity or the character of a neighbourhood or area, or the loss of residential accommodation where such loss is not outweighed by demonstrable local economic benefits. So turning to local development plan policies, the site lies within a residential area under policy H1, and policy D1 was also used in the reason for refusal. So I'll just have a look at policy H1. So this states that within existing residential areas, proposals for non-residential uses will be supported where they're considered complementary to residential use and where it can be demonstrated that the use would cause no conflict with residential amenity. The local development plans policy on tourism and culture. That seeks to provide these facilities closer to the city centre. So proposals should complement existing visitor facilities and be sequentially located in the city centre or on sites allocated for that use. And then the waste management requirements for new development, similar to NPF 4. Design policy in the local plan. Again, the 6 qualities of good design. They include sustainable transport, links, and in terms of safe and pleasant, pedestrian movement, and then they avoid unacceptable impacts on adjoining uses in terms of noise, smell, vibration, dust. Privacy and overshadowing are mentioned there as well. And the local development plan has similar policies on sustainable transport and parking. So in terms of the short-term lets APG, the relevant considerations for these applications would be whether the property is a flat, and if so, what floor of the building it's located on, the maximum number of guests that will use the STL, whether it's to be used on a full-time or part-time basis, the parking arrangements, the anticipated turnover of guests and length of stays, the arrangement for storage of waste, how many other properties the STL shares an access with, and communal areas, details of communal amenities or external amenity space, and the character of the area, including existing uses. Also relevant material considerations are the government's publication on short-term lets, which details how they can make an important contribution to the tourist economy, and also looks at the social costs with potentially affecting the supply of housing, increasing costs of housing, impact on local amenities, the quality of neighbourhoods and sense of community, nuisance through noise, etc., and the use of short-term lets for criminal enterprise. And then the circular also refers to policy 30 on tourism. It states that there's a need to balance wider policy objectives and that planning authorities may grant permission for a limited time. And also the Scottish Government research findings that the most common positive impact is local economic impact associated with tourism. So a reminder of the primacy of the development plan and that all applications be determined in accordance with it unless material considerations indicate otherwise. And finally, the basis for decision. Would there be harm to residential amenity? The appropriateness of the location for a short-term let, the impact on the local economy, and the accessibility to the city centre and visitor attractions. And does it apply with the development plan as a whole, or are there material considerations indicating otherwise? And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions, members? Councillor Cook.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Green. When you showed the reasons for refusal slide earlier on, one of the reasons for refusal given was loss of amenity. Was that talking about loss of amenity to the neighbours or lack of amenity for people using the flat itself?
Yes, it's talking about it for the neighbours.
Thanks, that's clarified. I was a bit confused, but that's clarified it for me. Thank you.
Yeah, that's one of the questions that I was going to come on to Councillor Cook, just in relation to amenity. I don't envisage, just with the nature of the effectively what looks like the end of a close, how many properties is it that comes off of that one area? Oh, you're on mute.
I think there's two. There's two front doors next to the front door to the basement flat. So I think that's the other ground floor flats access from the front. So there's an adjacent front door, which I think goes to the upper flat, and then there's the front door kind of opposite, which goes into the building on the lane.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, members? Not seeing any. Okay, thank you. So in accordance with the procedural note circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations relating to this case have been considered and taken into account. Determination, members. I do note that the applicant has provided other cases and each case to be determined on its own merits. This case, and I always try and look for mitigation in this regard, I can't seem to find any mitigation that could potentially be put in place in relation to the amenity for other residents. There isn't sufficient area for screening, opaqueness of glass, etc., for other residents in this area. And with a number of properties in this area, which is, it was two access off this area, but it seemed to be quite close proximity. I think that in terms of that, there is still that conflict with residential amenity, but we'll take others in if they have anything. Councillor Clark.
Likewise yourself there, I was quite interested in that there is two doors there. It's a very narrow path, etc. I was a bit confused to start with, but on looking further into the park and hearing more, I'm satisfied now, so I don't need to ask the question.
Councillor Cook.
I'm with you guys. I mean, I think the NPF for policy 30 on its loss of residential and somewhere that's only going to have two people is not going to have a massive economic effect that outweighs that. I think there's the issue of loss of amenity to the neighbours. So I'm pretty much in agreement with the officer's finding.
Thank you very much. Therefore, the local review body has therefore agreed to unanimously uphold the decision of the appointed officer, and the application is therefore refused. Please note a decision notice from today's meeting will be issued to the applicant or agent in the forthcoming days. Thank you very much, members. So turning in consideration of the second case in respect of a non-determination of the application for detailed planning permission for the erection of dwelling house and subdivision of view at land to the east of Birchwood. This is at number 1 South Avenue, Aberdeen, planning reference 251386. We'll now again hear from the planning advisor in attendance, Ms. Lucy Green, who will provide us with a description of the application proposal, as well as the relevant policies to be considered when determining the application. I would again point out today that Ms. Green attends today's meeting to provide us with the necessary professional guidance because she's not been involved in the early consideration of the application under review. Ms. Green will not, however, be expressed on the merits of the proposed development, and in effect her role will be a neutral one involving provision of factual information and guidance only. As a number of people have now joined the call, I'd like to point out again that can I ask those who are observing today's meeting to keep their microphones and cameras switched off throughout. Please note that the applicant, agents or interested parties are not allowed to take part in the proceedings of the LRB, and that mics and cameras should remain off throughout the meeting. I'll then pass forward to Ms. Green, who will take us through today's application.
Thank you, convener. I'll just share my presentation for this one. So this is a request for review into the non-determination of the application for the erection of a dwelling house and subdivision of a few at Birchwood 1 South Avenue. And the review was submitted with all the necessary information within the time limit. The applicant stated on the notice of review that there are no new matters raised within the submissions. In terms of procedure by which the review would be conducted, the applicant expressed the view that it may proceed without site visit on the basis of the information submitted. So I'll provide some background information to the case before handing back for members to decide whether they need any further information and how they wish to proceed. So this is the site location plan. This is Birchwood House here, which is divided into 3 flats, and the application site here. So it lies to the north of the Deeside line, or the northwest, and is part of the curtilage of the upper flat within Birchwood House. And the site is approximately 1 acre, 4,000 meters squared within the red line. This area is roughly 42 meters by 48 meters, rough guide. And then referred to in the documents, Birchwood Lodge, Birchlea. This is 18 and 20 St Devenick's Place. And then Grange Lodge here. 37 Deeside is just there. So that's just taken from Google Maps showing the site here. Birchwood House just there. And that's the Deeside line. So this is the site plan that was submitted with the application. It shows the location of the proposed new house with the 2 accesses. The north access here, which is to the upper and north wing of Birchwood, and then the southern access to lower and upper Birchwood flats. These red areas are where there would be alterations for passing places. So the house would front in a southward direction to the southeast, with parking spaces also just there. There would be hedges planted to create this sort of private garden area. And there's also sections of wall alongside the access roads. So with regard to the gas pipe diversion, which is shown in blue on this plan, the applicant has submitted a further layout plan, which is within the agenda. But the layout plan under consideration is the one submitted during the application determination period. I can answer further questions about that if members have them. This is just a further photograph of the site, 3D Google image showing the site here. And then this drawing shows the curtilages of the various properties. Yeah, so this is the amenity that would be left for the upper flat. And then the others would remain as existing. So this is the south elevation as proposed. Just enlarged it here. This shows Birchwood House, the proposed house, and St Devenick's Place house there, and just shows them in together. And then this is showing the daylight calculations from the windows of Birchwood House. See it in a bit more detail there. The 25-degree line from the centre of the windows. So the overall height of the proposed house would be 9 metres. There would be 3 bedrooms on the first floor, and the proposed materials are granite and zinc cladding. Some further details on another slide. So that's the rear north elevation of the house, shown with Birchwood House there. And then this is Birchwood Lodge, the side elevation of the house. Again, the other side elevation with Birchwood House in the background there. So that's the front of the house facing southwest. Sorry, southeast. So this plan shows the tree survey. The blue lines are the root protection areas of the trees, and then this beige line is the zone of influence of the trees. So, which is basically the sort of falling distance of the tree in relation to the house there. And then the pink lines are the proposed tree protection fencing that would be put in place during construction. Then again, that's shown without the house. You can see the categories of the various trees. Under the proposal, there would be no trees lost for development for the house. And this was a shadow analysis for March and July that was submitted. You can see the existing and proposed impact of the house. You can see midday in March, the shadow would start to come onto the garden ground here, 10 AM, more shadow onto the garden ground. There was only submitted for March and July. And this is the detailed elevations of the house as proposed, with the materials granite, grey granite, the anthracite zinc cladding, and the slate to the roof. So this bay projects forward from the front of the house, as you can see there in this side elevation. And then the rear elevation, the other side elevation. That's the elevation that would be closest to Birchwood House. And then this section through the house. And you can see the design with the almost flat roof and then the gables that project. And the floor plans at ground, first and attic level. So this is taken from the construction plan, just shows construction and delivery routes to the house. Contractor laydown area there. And this is a landscape planting plan that has been submitted, showing the hedging, the stretch of wildlife hedging just here. And this is the extent of the tree preservation order that covers the site and surrounding area. Tree Preservation Order 157, and it notes that all trees are covered within the area. And then I've got a few photographs. These are taken from the objectors' submissions. They aren't dated, so don't show a fence that's been installed in this area. So that's obviously looking across the site to the side elevation of Birchwood House. This one looks across the front towards the site, which is in here, and that's the southern access. This one is also the southern access, with the site being in this area here. And that's taken across the site. Some further photographs, again looking along the southern access. So the house would be in here, looking across the site. And then looking from the south, so that's the southern access with the site in the background. This photograph was also in the objections, and I think it must be taken from the north wing with the site here and the house on St Devenick's Place. That one appears to be taken from Birchwood Lodge, looking southwards across the site, so the house would be built here. And that's the south access, with the north access just behind this fence. And this is also from the objector's submissions looking along the south access. So key determining factors. The impact on the pattern of development, character and appearance of the area. This is just a summary of what's in the draft report of handling in the agenda. The impact on residential amenity for neighbouring dwellings and the impact on protected trees. And the report concludes that refusal is recommended due to overdevelopment, precedent for subdivision resulting in erosion of the character of the area, the impact on the amenity of neighbours due to the overbearing nature of the proposal, the outlook from windows and garden to the southwest, the dominant and intrusive impact on the use of the access to the property by the neighbour, that's the south access, that it conflicts with policies on design in the NPF4 and the local plan, residential areas within the local plan and the amenity and space standards, as well as the subdivision and redevelopment of residential curtilages, APG, and that it's not consistent with the plan's spatial strategy and not of a smaller scale opportunity, in conflict with policy 16 in NPF4. And then also that there's an impact, detrimental impact on trees due to the gas line, which would be contrary to policy 6 on trees and policy 2 on climate mitigation in NPF4. Consultation responses from Environmental Health, there was no objection. If the application was approved, they would want it to be subject to a condition on sound insulation relating to the air source heat pump. Roads Development Management were content with 2 parking spaces being provided, and the size of driveway, also with the EV charging that's proposed and visibility, they considered acceptable. The waste team also had no objection, and the Community Council initially objected, but their latest response is neutral. They acknowledge sunlight impact on Birchwood Lodge and loss of privacy to 18 to 20 St Devenick's Place, that may be mitigated by trees and leaf in summer. They query the zone of influence, and which has been revised on a subsequent tree survey. The construction access plan should be conditioned, they state, and they point out that the overshadowing analysis doesn't include October to March, and they comment on the shared access and servitudes. Scottish Water had no objection. In terms of representations, there were 65 to the planning application, 18 object, 46 support, and there was 1 neutral, and the report summarises the issues. There were further responses sent to the LRB, and 2 supported and 8 objected. Turning to the applicant's statement of reasons for seeking review and response to the report of handling draft, this is just a summary. They comment on the timeline of the application determination period, with delays due to the re-notification of neighbours, despite what they considered to be changes that were non-material. With the tree survey now confirming that no trees would be removed and that no root protection areas or zones of influence would be affected by the proposal, and they state the duty of planning authorities to deal with applications. They state that the Community Council has removed their objection, that the report explains that neighbours are not affected under the 25-degree rule for daylight or the 45-degree rule for sunlight, that the window-to-window distances for privacy are acceptable, and that overlooking of windows and the distance from Birchwood House are also acceptable. There are matters referred to in relation to property, in particular in relation to services, and a revised layout drawing was submitted following the draft officer's report, which proposed a new route for the gas line. They also stated that the planning officer has no concerns with the overbearing impact on Birchwood Lodge, and this was not raised at pre-app stage where the building was 4 metres closer. They also state that the draft report is completely different to comments at the pre-app stage, and that these are addressed by the proposals for the siting, size, design and density of the house. Some further comments. In summary, the garden area to the south of the access is private and is not public amenity space. That the density is less than 10%. I think that's referring to the density with the whole site included, so the area south of the south access as well. Whereas the development next door This is referring to an adjacent site where there was an appeal. The development hasn't been implemented and the appeal was dismissed due to tree impact, but the reporter commented that a density of 32.5% was acceptable. They state that the proposed house would be hardly visible from South Avenue, that the proposal would solve access issues due to passing places being introduced, that the construction plan would resolve any issues during construction, that no trees would be harmed for the proposal, services can be rerouted and would avoid damage to neighbouring trees, that people's well-being is not a planning consideration, and that the proposed house is smaller than Birchwood. Finally, convener, since publication of the agenda, correspondence has been received from objectors raising concerns regarding the applicant's response to comments submitted on the review documents. Members should note that in accordance with the Council's established procedure for the processing of non-determination reviews, interested parties were afforded an opportunity to comment on the review documents, and the applicant was subsequently given an opportunity to respond to those comments. The applicant's response forms part of the review documentation before members today. There is no further stage within that procedure provided for additional comments by interested parties. Prior to handing back to members to decide how to proceed, I'll hand over to the Council's legal advisor, Elena Plews.
Thank you, Ms Green. Just to follow up what Ms Green has said, convener, regarding the correspondence that has been received from the objectors, I would highlight that the role of the local review body at this stage is to decide whether the review documentation before the body provides sufficient information to enable the review to be determined. If members consider that they have sufficient information, they may proceed to determine the review at this stage. If members consider that further information is required, the regulations provide powers for the review body to seek further written submissions, to hold a hearing session, or to undertake a site inspection. Accordingly, the question for members at this stage is whether the concerns raised by objectors lead you to conclude that further information is required before the review can be determined. If members are satisfied that they have sufficient information before them, they may proceed. If not, members have the power to direct such further procedure as they may require by way of written submissions, hearing session, and/or a site visit. Thank you, convener.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clark, Councillor Cook, do you have any questions regarding that process there, or are you happy to move to the next stage?
I'm
Yeah,
happy to move to the next stage. Sorry.
Likewise, sorry as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Therefore, in agreement, we have sufficient information. In agreement, thank you very much. Therefore, as members now feel that we have sufficient information to proceed, we'll now pass back to Ms Green, who will take us through the relevant policies and considerations for this review.
Thank you, convener. I'll just share my presentation again. So these are the relevant policies within NPF 4, which I'll go through in the following slides. So as we know, policies 1 and 2 are relevant to all applications, and all decisions should give significant weight to the climate and nature crises, climate mitigation, and also contribute to the enhancement of biodiversity, which I will just cover on this slide. So the outcome that is sought from this policy is the enhancement of biodiversity. And for local development, this will include appropriate measures to conserve, restore and enhance biodiversity, with measures being proportionate to the nature and scale of development. Policy 6 in NPF 4 and NE 5 in the local development plan both seek to retain trees, and development should not result in the loss of or damage to trees and woodlands. No trees are being proposed to be removed as part of the proposal. There would be a question over how services reach the house in terms of the impact on trees, and in particular there's the question of the gas line and trees in the neighbouring property. But for the house itself, it's not proposed to remove any trees. Sustainable development. This policy seeks to support development where it can be demonstrated that the transport requirements have been considered in line with sustainable travel. So that's active travel and public transport. So this is design policy with the 6 qualities of successful places, those being healthy, pleasant, supporting attractive natural and built space, connected, distinctive, supporting attention to detail of local architectural styles, sustainability in terms of efficient use of resources and allowing people to live, play, work and stay in their area, and adaptability. Local living and the 20-minute neighbourhood policy is also relevant, with development proposals being encouraged where they contribute to local living. And then turning to policy 16. So the site lies within a residential area. And policy 16, so section F is relevant. Section A states that development proposals for new homes on land allocated for housing in the LDP will be supported. This area is an established residential zone, so the approach taken is that development proposals, that section F is relevant. So development proposals for new homes on land not allocated for housing will be supported where they proposal is supported by an agreed timescale. I mean, this is just one house, it's not a large development, so that's not so relevant here. Section 2, the proposal is otherwise consistent with the plan's spatial strategy and other relevant policies, including local living and 20-minute neighbourhoods. And either the first bullet point refers to delivery of housing within the local development plan. This is only a single house, so the most relevant point here is that the proposal is for a smaller scale opportunity within an existing settlement boundary. And then I've included also the household development proposals section just because it's relevant in terms of how we would look at impact on the character and environmental quality of the proposal in terms of impacts on neighbouring properties. So within residential areas, new development will be approved in principle where it doesn't constitute overdevelopment, it doesn't have an adverse impact on residential amenity and the character and appearance of the area, and it does not result in the loss of open space. So just to comment on the space is all garden curtilage, so it wouldn't count as public open space in terms of that policy. And then in terms of density, the council will seek an appropriate density of development on housing allocations and windfall sites. And so you can see that the policy actually states a density for new development of no less than 50 dwellings per hectare. However, it also talks about the scale and layout of the site and its context. So this policy, these are the policies relating to surface water drainage. The site's not at flood risk, so it's surface water drainage that would be covered by this policy, and it seeks to manage rain and surface water through sustainable urban drainage systems, and also states that there should be connections to public sewers. So policy on health and safety, policy 23, seeks to protect people and places from environmental harm, seeks to improve health. And digital infrastructure seeks to have connections for digital infrastructure for new developments. Local development plan policies and planning guidance are listed there, and I'll just cover those in the slides that follow. So policy D1 seeks to ensure high standards of design and a strong and distinctive sense of place. And then there are the 6 qualities of successful places, which are listed there. And it states that proposals that are poorly designed and are not consistent with these 6 qualities will not be supported. And these include distinctive, referring to scale, built form and sense of place; sustainable, safe and pleasant, which in particular avoids unacceptable impacts on adjoining uses, including noise, smell, vibration, dust, air quality, privacy and overshadowing; healthy, connected and adaptable, with flexibility for changing needs. Policy D2 on amenity. This states that in order to ensure provision of amenity, the following principles apply. Development should make the most of opportunities to enhance views and sunlight through appropriate siting, layout and orientation. Ensure that occupiers are afforded adequate levels of amenity. And with residential developments, will also ensure that occupiers have adequate levels of privacy, minimum standards for internal floor space and external space, provide no less than 50% of usable amenity space where it's necessary to provide car parking, ensure minimal shading of external private and public spaces, ensure all residents have access to private or semi-private open space, and have a private space to an enclosed garden or court to ensure a sense of safety and enclosure. Landscape design policy. So in particular, the first point here of landscape design proposals will be integrated. Landscaping would be integrated early into the layout and design of the site, informing the spatial arrangement of the built and natural elements. And then policy NE3 covers the impact on sites and protected species. And then it seeks to have an assessment of all natural heritage within the site. So the tree survey was submitted. As there were no trees to be removed, a bat survey was not submitted with the application. And then policy 5 seeks to ensure appropriate waste management for the new development. And then policy 6, low and zero carbon buildings and water efficiency. That's generally now covered by building standards, as the requirements under that are generally greater than the requirements under the planning policy. There's the policy on parking, which seeks for development to have parking as set out in the APG. The roads team were content with the parking provided here, which was 2 parking spaces at the front with a EV charger. And then turning to the subdivision and redevelopment of curtilages. So there are several principles which should be considered. That new dwellings must respect the established pattern of development formed by the relationship between buildings and their surrounding spaces. The scale and massing of the new dwelling should complement the scale of surrounding properties. The density of the surrounding area should be reflected in development proposals for new and existing properties. And then it has the general guide of 33%. That's the general guide across the city. The distance between proposed dwellings and the proposed and existing dwellings should be similar to that predominating on the street. And ridges and wall heads of new dwellings should be no higher than the ridges and wall heads of adjoining dwellings. So then the other relevant point here is, in the case of redevelopment of an exceptionally large site, it may be possible for detached houses to be built which gain access from a new private driveway or a new road constructed to adoptable standard. So a reminder of the primacy of the development plan, with all applications being determined in accordance with policies unless material considerations indicate otherwise. So a very brief summary of the considerations of the scale, form and design of the proposal and impact on the surrounding area, including the amenity of neighbouring houses and the impact on trees. So overall, does the proposal comply with the development plan as a whole, or are there material considerations weighing for or against the proposal? And I'm happy to try and answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that information. Any questions, members? Councillor Cook.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. First one is on, just for clarity, on this issue of some representations being made too late and should be discounted. Are those the things that we've got in our pack at point 3.8? So it's page 471 onwards, or is it the ones from page 421 onwards, or is it the ones on page 401 onwards, or is it none of those? Which ones am I ignoring?
It's none of those. Everything in the agenda is for consideration.
Right.
What happened was that some of the objectors wanted to have a chance to respond to the applicant's last submissions, and so that's what we were referring to.
Okay.
So if
thanks.
there was
No,
anything that you felt was missing following from any of the representations or any of the application details, the LRB can ask formally for further information to be submitted, but everything in the agenda is relevant for consideration.
Fine. No, thanks for that clarification. Yeah, I just given the comment from Elena Blues, I just wondered if there was anything there that we should ignore, but no. Okay, next question, if I may. There is one of the representations that came in said that the name of the developer or name of the applicant is a company that doesn't exist and is casting doubt on that. Is that something relevant, or is it not a material planning consideration that we should just ignore?
I mean, we just have to take things at face value. It's not a relevant planning consideration.
Thanks. I suspected that was the case, but it's good to get the clarification. Couple of others for clarification. just to make sure that I'm reading this stuff properly. There's a comment on the reasons for refusal, which was around outlook from the windows. What we're talking about there is the outlook from the windows of the proposed new house onto neighbours, rather than spoiling someone's view, as it were.
No, it is referring to the outlook from windows of the flats to the southwest. Although the tests for daylighting and sunlighting passes those, it's more the sort of nature, the overbearing impact of the proposed house. That's not my opinion. I'm just describing the reason, the draft reason for refusal. It's the sort of overpowering impact of that house.
So, and again, apologies if I'm asking you a question that you can't answer for various reasons. Is that the same as saying we're spoiling the view?
It's
Sorry.
not quite the same. No, it's more an impression of something being there. I mean, view is part of it, I suppose, but it's a presence of a large development.
Okay, thanks for that. And then again, another one for clarification, just to make sure I've understood correctly. The wee area of garden which has got goalposts at either end, we're saying that's not a public amenity, that's a private bit of land. Yeah.
All of it's a private garden curtilage. The area with the goalposts would be the site of the house and private garden. Then to the south of the access, there's another area which would also be the garden of the proposed house, but is obviously separated by having the access. But it would.
Okay.
What it's saying is that area would not be and isn't a public open space. It's part of the grounds of the proposed house.
Thanks. And then final one. I think this is my final one. There was a comment in the representation from the community council, the second one that moved from object to neutral. There's a comment about no data on overshadowing between October and March. Could you comment on that?
Yes, the shadow analysis was done in March and then in July. So between those dates, through the winter months, we weren't shown shadowing then. So obviously there'd be longer shadows. So we'll just have to imagine that.
Yeah, I think I'm okay now. Yes. Thanks.
Thanks very much. The applicant has stated that there seems to be discrepancies regarding the uploading of draft reports. States that there was a draft report reaching 27 pages and then one was immediately uploaded regarding 19. I'm just wondering why that was in sort of quick succession to that.
Well, I'm assuming that by mistake an earlier version of the report was uploaded instead of the final version, and then it was quickly corrected.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you. Any further questions, members? Councillor Clark.
Thank you. I've got a wee bit of concern. I've looked at all the maps, and I'm looking at the first one on page 66. The surrounding area in red, we have been told it's 3 cars, now it's down to 2 cars that's used. Is there any access to any other of these properties that would be able to use this area or not? Or is this just solely for the new house?
Oh, you're on mute, Lucy.
Sorry, did you say page 67?
66. Is it only that house that has the access for, is it 2 or 3 cars?
So yeah, so this plan here, this route here is shared, so there's an access into the lodge from it. Then this route coming round is shared by the north wing of Birchwood House and the upper flat, the north access. The south access is shared by the upper and lower flats of Birchwood House and would be shared with the proposed house in here, with 2 parking spaces being provided on there within their own curtilage, only for the use of that house.
Okay, thank you very much for that. It was just something I was wanting cleared up. Thank you.
Thank you. The applicant has obviously raised concerns regarding the length of time that this is sort of taken to determination, in stating that there wasn't the feeling that the required the re-notification to neighbours. I just wonder if we can sort of clarify why there was re-notification to neighbours at the time.
It was, well, for the reasons in the report of handling just at the end, but it's a resubmission of a tree survey, an accurate tree survey, which was requested according to the report because in order, well, to have an accurate tree survey, it may have affected the layout and design of the house, and so to give neighbours the chance to comment on that accurate tree survey.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, members, at this point? Councillor Cook looks deep in thought.
I don't think I've got any more questions. No, I think yeah, I think I'm okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Therefore, in accordance with the procedural note circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations relating to the case have been considered and taken into account. Members, determination on this one? Who would like to begin? Councillor Cook.
Thanks for putting me on the spot. Yeah, I mean, as with many of these things, it's not that straightforward, and I can kind of understand where the immediate neighbours are coming from. On the other hand, if I look at the reasons for refusal, it doesn't scream overdevelopment at me. It doesn't scream it's detracting from the character and appearance of the neighbourhood to me. I don't think it's setting any precedent. So I'm leaning towards approving it, although I'd be interested in what others have got to say in case you can point out something that is that I'm missing.
Yeah, just have a look at sort of the report handling. I am sort of on the fence with this one a little bit. Just scrolling through my notes. I mean, obviously the tree survey is now there, and it does show that the house as submitted wouldn't have any detrimental effect on that. Obviously the officer has stated the percentages of development, but there has been that highlight that taking the entirety of the site into account with the additional part of the garden towards the south of that drive would then drop that percentage down, which would be then acceptable. Councillor Clark.
I am very, I'm a bit on the fence here, actually, a bit like yourself. I've got concerns, but they wouldn't be detriment to planning going through. The concerns about the trees, and we're being told that the trees will remain, that nothing will be cut down. I'm a bit worried of the shadiness in the months from July to the end of the year. Understand that the trees wouldn't be so covered in leaves by then, but would that not make the vision from the property, from the other people's properties, see more of the house? I mean, I've no problem with the building, the actual design of the building. I'm really concerned about from Grange House, Grange Lodge, on this one. I'm just not convinced. Does that sound wrong?
No, that's fine. Just in relation to the reasons for recommendation, obviously the curtilage layout has been mentioned there, would constitute context constitute of overdevelopment. I do note in here that there is, if plan permission was granted for the application, there is a significant risk of the unwelcome precedent for the similar subdivision of plots along South Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
But we do determine every application as assessed in its own merits, which I strongly state on every application that we do decide in planning and here in the LRB, everything is on its own merits. Would the dwelling house adversely affect the amenity afforded by neighbouring dwellings of Birchwood by being overbearing? Well, we've kind of covered the overbearing aspect of that.
Yeah.
I do note that the revisions, I'm just trying to think of what revision that we are looking at here, does state that it's 34 metres away from Birchwood House, which is further than what we would expect. So that change has been made. Therefore, does it now sit with the aims of policies 14 design quality in place of MPF 4 and policies D1 of quality placemaking and residential areas? Don't know if anyone else wants to come back in on that. I'm trying to give this as much of a thorough going through as possible. Miss Green.
Could I just double check the 34 meters? Are you taking that from, because I don't think it's as much as 34 meters. Can I just double check that for you?
Yeah, I think I mentioned that in one of the agent's documents, although it sticks in my head, but I'm trying to sift through and find that as fact. If you don't have a wee look at that for me as well, yes.
I'll come back to you in a moment. Yeah, I'm scaling off as 14.5-ish, 14.6.
I too didn't think it was 35, 34.
Yeah, I'm now struggling to find that figure as well at the moment, so I do retract that. I did, something must have picked out at that fact, but I now can't find that in any of the documentations.
see.
Yeah, I think that's referring to a different development that may be referenced. Okay, Councillor Cook.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm sorry. To give this as good a debate as we can we just look again at the impact on the outlook from the flats, because that's one of the areas where I said I was leaning towards approval, which I still am, but that's one of the things that's maybe holding me back a bit. So I don't know whether Mrs. Green can talk us through that in a bit more. Sorry, I've got lots of notes, lots of handwritten notes, and lots of annotations on this one, so I'm struggling to find the right bit.
Yeah, I mean, it refers to the overbearing presence. I can show you again the photograph from the north wing. Let me just find
that would be helpful.
Presentation.
Just have another wee look. Thanks.
Go back to the. I'll have to whisk through them. Right. Yeah, this one appears to be taken from the north wing. So the house would be here on, like between the goalposts, kind of that location. And so it would sit here. Distance from so it was 14.5 meters from the front of the house, not the front of the house, the side elevation of Birchwood House that sits further forward than this north wing. So this distance would be more than the 14.5 meters, but I would have to measure off to find it exactly. But yeah, this is where the house would sit, with a garden area immediately the other side of that fence, and then the garden area on the opposite side. Parking would be here.
Yeah, thanks. That's helpful.
That's when the house would sit there. That's the view from the north, from the house, Birchwood Lodge.
But that view we're looking at now, where you can see the hills in the distance and stuff, that would be basically blocked off by the new house.
I mean, view is not planning consideration, it's more the presence. But well, possibly. It's hard to say it. I honestly couldn't say whether you'd see that over the roof of the ridge from there, because I don't know what height that photograph's taken from, or it would depend if you were viewing it from the ground, or so I couldn't answer that.
And that photograph's looking south towards, sort of down towards the river. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
Is that helpful, Councillor Cook?
Yeah, I think it is. And so the house would be, sorry again to keep asking lots of questions. So the house would be kind of just the other side of this wooden fence that we can see in the foreground, rather than further back towards where there's a kind of kiddie slide thingy. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. It will be on the graphs here.
Okay, thanks.
There.
Members, are we content to determine, or is there any other questions, any other clarifications we need?
I think I'm as content as I'm ever going to be.
I know the feeling well.
Yeah. Okay. Right, let's determine this one. Given the line of questioning, re-looking at the photographs there, the information that we've received, and taken into account all the information in the pack that we've received at the time, having considered the proposal against the development plan as a whole, I am minded to support this application. Policy 16 of National Planning Framework 4 in terms of quality homes obviously supports the delivery of new homes in sustainable existing residential areas, which this does. This proposal would provide additional family dwelling within the urban boundary. It does. The site is already residential in nature, and the principle of residential development is therefore consistent with the overall spatial strategy. I do know that concerns have been raised regarding character and layout, although I consider that the proposal is capable of complying with the aims of Policy 14 of NPF 4 and design quality and place, Policy D1 quality placemaking, and the local development plan. The development would remain within a substantial plot of greening as seen in the landscaping plan, whereas a variety of houses in the immediate area and variations of plot sizes. Again, I do reiterate that each planning application must be determined on its own merits, and I have been very 50-50 on this from reading the pack right way through to today's meeting. I don't accept at this point that approval of the proposal would automatically create a harmful precedent in that regard. In terms of residential amenity, I am satisfied that a proposal can coexist with neighbouring properties, and that any changed outlook does not amount to an unacceptable level of harm under policy H1 residential areas. A degree of change is inevitable in urban development, and I do not consider that it impacts it sufficiently significantly to justify refusal. With regards to protected trees, obviously concerns have been raised regarding the technical matters around this, but those have been submitted to be acceptable. Any matters relating to policy 2 and climate mitigation adaptation is obviously mitigated through the planning and the retention of trees. Therefore, on balance, I do believe that the proposal accords with the broader objectives of NPF 4 policies 14, 16 and the ALDP policies D1 and H1, and that the identified concerns do not outweigh the benefits of delivering a new house in an established residential site. Therefore, at the moment, I can support the application, but we'll go around the room. Councillor Clark, I'll take you first.
Could you leave me for 1 second? Because I've just dropped a piece of paper and it's relevant to this section.
Absolutely.
Sorry, wasn't stapled together. So if I vanish, I'm still here.
That's fine. Councillor Cook.
Yeah, on balance, I'm with you, convener, so I'd be minded to approve the application. As you quite rightly said, it's not a straightforward one, but I think on balance, I'd be happy to approve.
Councillor Clark.
Right, sorry about that. Yes.
I'll buy you a stapler.
I do have one, it's just not working. What I was going to say here, I had concerns about the trees, etc. We've gone through everything about the trees. There's no culling of trees. I was concerned about the bats, but because there is no indication there of there being an issue, I'm happy to proceed with the application.
Thank you very much. Therefore, as the local review body has agreed to approve this application, we now need to consider whether any further conditions should be attached to approval of this application. I'll bring in Ms. Green.
Yeah, so I would suggest that we have a condition that looks at the construction method and routes of services, the gas pipes, fibre and water connections in relation to trees, and how those will be constructed and where they go, exactly the route that they take.
Yep.
Then materials, we may wish to see details and samples of those. Landscaping and biodiversity plans. I think there was reference to another rowan tree being planted. I'm not sure that's incorporated. So just a condition that we get those plans submitted and implemented. The environmental health had recommended one about sound insulation in relation to the air source heat pump.
Yep.
That the tree protection and method statement for constructing passing places in relation to tree roots, that those form the subject of a condition. I think that's everything with construction hours advisory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, as we said, I mentioned the hours around construction, just as sure as that's in.
Sorry, SUDS and SUDS surface water drainage was the other one.
Okay. Eleanor?
Could I just check, Ms. Green, would we also need a condition in relation to the duration of the permission?
Yes.
Ah.
Yes, sorry, that's a standard
Yep.
one that I didn't mention because, yeah.
And Councillor Cook?
Yeah, can I just check in relation to the gas pipe and other utilities, that moving that is not going to adversely affect other properties in the area?
Well, I mean, any private legal land ownership issues or servitudes, burdens, etc., is not for the planning process. They just need to be sorted out separately.
Yeah. And obviously that'll be dealt with by condition anyway in terms of the routing of that, which officers will have a look at. Okay, if there's no further conditions to be added, thank you very much to everyone who has attended today's meeting. Please note that decision notice from today's meetings will be issued to applicants and agents in forthcoming days. Thank you very much to Eleanor and Lucy for guiding us through this one, and to Councillor Clark and Councillor Cook. Good day.
Thanks.
Cheerio.